Welcome to Book Solve, and this next book, our third book in the series of 100 Great Reads, books selected from my library. Let's have a look at what we've got to say with this one. From a dose of magical realism mixed into fiction written around an historical event to a novella-sized book with full-blown surrealism. We're going globe-trotting again. The first book, remember, was set in Japan. Book 2 is in Angola. And book 3 takes us to Argentina. To an author called Cesar Aira, who was born in Coronel Pringles and has published over 100 short books of stories, novels, and essays. He's a prolific writer, not just in fiction, but also academically. And in fact, since 1993, a hallmark of his work has been a truly frenetic level of writing and publication, 2 to 5 novella-length books each year. I don't know how true that is anymore. It's 2025. I imagine he's probably slowed down since that was written. But again, I'm choosing a book written in translation, this time from the Spanish by Chris Andrews. And this is a short book. It's only 115 pages long. This edition published by independent publishers called New Edition. Quite like getting books from independent publishers rather than the big houses, but it's not always where they come from. So, How I Became a Nun by Cesar Aira is a novel about a precocious 6-year-old named Cesar Aira. So there's a certain amount of autobiography, but there isn't really at all. Cesar, the character in the book, who claims to be alternately a boy or a girl, mainly a girl, has a hyper-developed sense of reality, of plethora of hang-ups, and a casual relationship with the truth. So we've got a very complex little character here, a 6-year-old who's not totally set in the world of reality. The story, and there are going to be big spoilers here, I would suggest if you haven't read the book, just go away and read it now, because it'll take you not very long at all. And if you listen to this, you'll know what happens. And I think it is one of those books where probably the less you know, the better. Unlike The Children of the Dead that I'm reading at the moment, the Austrian book, where a certain amount of background and context help you to understand the book. This one, where it's based on surreal ideas, it's much better not to have that, I think. But anyway, the story begins when Cesar's family move from the countryside to Rosario, a big city in Argentina. I'm not sure, it might be Coronel Pringles that they moved from. Could be, I'm not sure. Although that's quite a big town anyway, and I think is a city now. Where her father takes her for a promised ice cream. Again, we're talking, I don't know whether her parents think of her as a boy, or I would say so, because they call her Cesar. But the child's horrified at the taste of the strawberry ice cream, which disappoints the father, and he insists that she finish her ice cream and stop being difficult about it. She's whining a lot that it's terrible and really horrible. But after he's tasted the ice cream himself, he realises that it's contaminated. And in an altercation, there's a bit of a dust-up between him and the ice cream vendor, and he ends up killing the ice cream vendor. I mean, this is not just an ice cream that's been contaminated with just things that aren't nice to eat. It's contaminated with cyanide, and Cesar falls into some coma. He's seriously ill, taken to a hospital, and spends a lot of time in hospital. Sometimes suffering from delusions. But once out of hospital, she learns that her father's been sent away to prison for 8 years because of that murder. And she joins a school 3 months late into the class and finds herself disconnected from her peers in the class. They've learned to read. So she gets drawn, isolated by those other children. She gets drawn into her own world of make-believe and imagination. Her only friends are her mother and a boy named Arturo Carrera. And in the end, she's kidnapped by the wife of the ice cream vendor. The wife, who wants to seek some vengeance for the murder of her husband, throws Cesar into a drum of strawberry ice cream, which seems to have become the girl's greatest horror, the worst thing that could possibly happen to her. And the story's told by Cesar, 6 years old, and it captures the child's sense of wonder and naivety, but it blurs the categories of what's imagined and what is real. The best review that I found about this is Jaska Hoffman, who wrote the novella, and I'd like to read that now. Aira draws on the tradition of picaresque novels in Spanish that extend back to the 16th century. It's definitely a picaresque novel. But he subverts the genre by allowing his narrator to escape from her daily life into a series of grandiose reveries. When she visits her father in prison, Cesar crawls through a hole in the wall, imagining that each successive incident right from the start, from the moment I tasted the strawberry ice cream, had been leading me to this crowning moment, preparing me to be the angel, the guardian angel of all criminals, of thieves and murderers. And when a word she deciphers on the wall of the boys' bathroom gets her into trouble at school, she retreats to an attic to play teacher to a room full of imaginary dyslexic children, and then becomes her own pupil by giving herself minute instructions to accompany every waking act. How to manipulate cutlery, how to put on one's trousers, how to swallow saliva. And these good works, in the privacy of her own mind, are the closest Cesar comes to becoming a nun, although the book's called How I Became a Nun. No nuns in this story. In real life, however, she is a compulsive liar. She lies to the doctor, who treats her for the cyanide poisoning. She humiliates her mother on a public bus by asking loudly and repeatedly whether her father is dead, when she knows he's not. Then she lets the reader in on a secret to lying well. Pretend convincingly not to know certain things. And this habit of omission may well be how she convinces herself that she's really a girl, although it's not entirely clear that she's deceiving herself at all. Why can't Cesar face the truth? The closest she comes to an answer is when she says that after poisoning, something had broken inside me, a valve, a little safety device that used to allow me to switch levels, presumably between fantasy and reality. But she is also trying to escape from a body of the wrong sex and from a sense of guilt, however misplaced, over the ice cream vendor's fate. somehow she thinks maybe it was my fault. She's 6 years old, and when terrible things happen in the life of a 6-year-old, they will blame themselves for whatever it is, even though it's really not their fault. On another level, though, Cesar's ambitious delusions seem imposed by the author. Despite Chris Andrews' clear translation, I don't know, was it a different translation to the one that I was using? No, it's the same one. Aira's prose seems hesitant. His imaginative flights, clipped by the 6-year-old mind he's trying to inhabit. As a result, these perplexing episodes don't quite add up to a credible story, but Aira does evoke a sense of childhood that is chilling and bittersweet, like the poisonous cone of a strawberry ice cream. And, in the end, I suppose the reviewer there, Hoffman, is she perhaps isn't as taken with the book as I am. I think it's really a wonderful book, and so surprising and fresh and captivating, I think is how I would say it. I'll read you a little bit of the book because I think that's really part of what I want to do in these little sessions. And here's a passage where Cesar is musing on his or her friend. What I liked about Arturo Carrera was that he didn't try to be clever or amusing or sophisticated or profound. He never tried to do or be anything. He just was. And that was a novelty for me. But what was even more novel was that I liked it. I was fascinated by it. I wanted to stay near him all the time in silence, watching him. I was constantly watching him. And I could see that he wasn't watching me. He wasn't even aware of being watched. He wasn't interested in anything. And yet, he was the only interesting person I'd ever met. And when I tried to work out the reason for this, I realised that I didn't know what interesting meant. He was like a blank sheet of paper, a vacuum, a zero. And maybe that was why he had such an effect on me. If only I could stop thinking. But I couldn't. I envied his oblivion. I wanted to go inside it as if it were a house and live there with him in his indifference. That was love, surely? But love didn't have a name in my vocabulary yet. Really nice piece there, and it's an extract that really shows that in the book, the 6-year-old protagonist thinks and acts like a mature grown-up would, which is just really one of the surreal paradoxes of the novel. So overall, the themes of this book are identity and gender, clearly, because Cesar is ambiguously gendered in boy or a girl at the same time. So the book's challenging fixed notions of identity, suggesting that it's a fluid thing, it's constructed and unstable, that we might think of ourselves as male and female in various aspects of our various aspects of our being, of how we behave or what we feel. It's got a theme of childhood and perception. So it's a story that's told from the perspective of a 6-year-old, but one with an unusually articulate and introspective voice. And there's a tension there, which throws up the question of how is reality constructed? Is it through subjective our own subjective experiences? Is it not as objective as we think it might be? As a theme of trauma and reality distortion, that's the scene with the ice cream vendor is a central traumatic event of the whole book, but is incredibly bizarre. And it's from there that the narrative becomes increasingly surreal. Um, and in a way, that's saying how much trauma distorts reality and memory. It's as though the trauma of something terrible happening suddenly throws your conception of the world off kilter entirely into a different mode, into a different way of seeing things. Um, it's got a theme uh, of violence and absurdity. Um, obviously, uh, the murders are a really absurd thing to happen, and this just underlies the whole randomness and irrationality of human behaviour. Something really unexpected can happen at any one particular time because we can suddenly react that way to things. Um, there's the way in the book that Aira plays with the narrative form with self-reflexivity and metafiction. Um, the story itself undermines itself in places, and it's the language that's used becomes a tool of creation and confusion, and reflecting the instability of the meaning. And it's also, as our first two books were, about isolation. Cesar is often misunderstood by adults and peers, and this builds the sense of isolation. It's again an individual person feeling isolated from others. In some, How I Became a Nun uses its surreal narrative and its child protagonist to explore profound questions about identity, perception, trauma, and the nature of storytelling itself. So I pick it up and read it, because you can do that in next to no time. Cesar Aira's got a lot of different small novels like this that are very much worth exploring. I've got a number of them in my library, and no doubt could buy quite a few more, I think. So there we are. That's book 3 in 100 Great Reads. So it's goodbye from Booksolve, and happy reading to you all.